講到潮流趨勢同埋消費者洞察 ，WGSN 一直被譽為時裝界嘅 Bloomberg， 好多國際大品牌夏季興啲乜，消費者想啲乜，都會參考佢哋嘅預測同埋分析。今集我哋請到 WGSN Head of APAC Marc Villemat 同我哋傾下一個好貼近零售未來嘅話題 Phygital Strategy， 將電商元素帶入實體空間，究竟係加多幾塊 mon 呢，定係重新定義實體店嘅存在價值呢？今集 MarketingPulse and eTailingPulse Podcast， 我哋同你一齊嚟探討下。First of all, I welcome Marc.
Thank you.
Welcome, Marc, to our show. Can you tell us a bit more about WGSN? I understand it's a leading research company for consumer trends, but I think it's more than that.
Yeah. So first of all, thank you for having me. I'm very excited to be here and meet you. So we've been in the kind of trend business for the last 25 years. And as you say, it's not just about trend, it's about kind of understanding how consumers are evolving and changing in light of the kind of macro drivers of change that are happening in the world, right? So it's looking at those changes across politics, society, and with that kind of industrial and cultural context, and how those changes are impacting us as human beings, and therefore us as consumers. The way then WGSN work is we try to interpret those changes into product design, service design, and experience design. And so there's that kind of idea that there's a deep connections in the way the product looks and some macro drivers that happen in the world. And so that's kind of what we're trying to explain and help businesses understand.
Is it one of the reasons it started from a lot of your clients is looking for design solution or service from WGSN?
Yes. So we started in fashion. That's kind of where we get that notoriety. We started in fashion and we serviced first designers because designers are very creative, of course, but then businesses need also to have that commercial mindset. They can't just let a designer design everything they want and then just put on shelves because there's a lot of risk. You don't want to miss a color. You don't want to have a lot of stock, right? So you have to have some sort of rationale for putting a certain design in the shelves. And so that's kind of what the connections that we've been doing. And so we're starting with doing that with fashion because it's kind of fast moving, of course. And then we've been quite successful at building that predictive analytics model for fashion. And so over the last kind of 10 years, we've evolved and now we're covering beauty cosmetics, we're covering food and drinks, we're covering consumer tech and sports and outdoor. And so but always with the same methodology and the same idea. So looking at the big changes and how those big changes impact the consumer and how then the product should be tailored or the service or the experience should be tailored to those
Interesting.
consumers.
I will follow up with the methodology. I think sounds amazing, the way you predict trends. So give me a sneak peek about year 2026. What is the trendiest colors?
Okay, that's a good question.
Besides
so first, but it's true. So you'll see on the site, right? It's funny because colors is the one most sought after trends report.
Yes.
Like every year we publish like the color of the years, and there's always one color for the years, and then there's always 5 colors that goes with it because we always build like a panel that go with it and per season, of course. And it's the one most sought after type of report because for a business it's very, very important. But then you need to have those 2 or 3 colors that will make you a bit unique and that will kind of grab the attention of your consumer. And so making that choice right is critical because otherwise you'll have a lot of stock and you'll have to discount and so on and so forth. There's so many trends around, right? So that's also the reality of where we are. And depending on the generation, if you're looking at the youth, at the older generation, depending on the countries, the regions, you're talking about seasonality earlier.
Yes,
so we have also countries without season. So there's a lot of those mixed trends. So it is important also to kind of drill down per generation, per country, to really find out what the trends you wanna follow, and also the one that also kind of address your brand strategy and your brand tone.
Yes, interesting. So this year, especially in this region, a lot of marketers are talking about e-commerce. E-commerce is huge in China. A lot of brands are doing so successfully. Hong Kong people are get used to like physical retail for many years, but this in the last couple of years is like a boom in e-commerce as well. Can you tell us a bit more about some of the WGSN perspective? What's this emerging trends comes from? Even in Hong Kong, it's such a convenient city.
Yeah, so you're right, and I think a lot of people love Hong Kong because of its convenience of shopping in store. Right? It is a tight city, but a big city, so it's easy to go out and shop around. It's not the same for a larger city in Asia Pacific, like in China or like in Korea, or like in Japan, right? But I think we have to think about that context of COVID. We have learned during COVID to live remotely and online and work remotely and online. And we kind of developed that appetite for high convenience of shopping. And therefore, I think now, obviously, COVID's done, thanks God. But we want to keep and retain some of that convenience in the post-COVID life. And so that kind of all aspect of, yes, I want to be able to shop online more. I want also to have, obviously, experience in store, but that's becoming very important and very easy. Do you want to keep that convenience because you've learned that convenience and it's good and you want to keep that convenience, right? So I think that's obviously here to stay and certainly brands and retailers need to adjust and adopt it.
Okay. There's another emerging terms about on this territory. Marketers call it Phygital. It's like a combination of physical and digital.
Yeah.
So what I'm sure you have heard of this term. From your perspective, what is it about?
Yeah, so you're right, the mashup between physical and digital technology. So if you think about kind of the history a bit, in kind of 1990s, e-commerce starting to appear.
Yeah.
Oftentimes was sitting beside your store.
Yeah.
And so oftentimes also competing with your store.
Yes.
Then you have social media, augmented reality that also kind of stay very strong today. Another recent developments, you obviously know you haven't missed it, but AI and robotics, right, are here to enhance human capability, make us faster, more efficient, smarter. And so robotics in particular is pretty exciting. So WGSN's covered CES in Las Vegas. Robotics is huge now, right? And so it's about how they replicate our movements, how they replicate our thinking. They can dance. Exactly. So it is for entertainment, it is for work, it is for health, it is for care. There's a lot of application of it. And so I think the Phygital now is, we're on a Phygital journey. It's not just adding a technology layer to your store. It's a lot more than that. It's how you make it, that interactions in between your online and offline experience, wherever the customers are. And that's what Phygital is about today. And again, obviously giving the development in technology, it here to stay and is gonna grow. Yeah.
Yes. Can you give us an example for the Phygital experience in a typical retail store this day? How like futuristic can be?
Yeah, I think we have a few, but it's if you think about immersion, right? You have an interesting one, Netflix House, in mainly in the US, I think for now, but they are bringing that digital world that you know on watching those programs on Netflix into a space, into a retail environment, and so you get to be the actors that you've seen on screen.
Games.
Yes, correct, exactly. So you get to be the actors a bit. You get to interact with the context, the environment, the stage that they are evolving in the programs that you love. And then eventually you have obviously the merchandisers that go with it, right?
Yes.
You come back with a t-shirt or maybe some foods that are themed after the show that you're watching. So that's a complete immersion. It's an interesting one because it starts from digital, it starts from online, and then it comes down to your store. Yeah.
You mentioned about beauty industry earlier and also fashion. Any other examples that worth mentioning for the retail for these categories?
Yeah, so we have a very, very cool example of a customer in Australia. They call Moose Toys, so they're making toys for kids, right? And so the way they are developing their products is, again, to look at how their customers are living their life. And so most recently, they've developed a range of products for kids that are mimicking what the mother would use as a beauty and cosmetic. So they make toys, but they get inspiration for beauty and cosmetics. And so they make products that have the consistency of a cream and that the kids can play with. So they kind of look at their mom in the morning getting ready to go to work, and they kind of have that interaction as well. And so I think that's quite interesting to see how again, if you think about it, a customer today, like us as customer, we wake up in the morning, we will use potentially beauty, cosmetics, we will dress up, we will have food. So we have a customers of all those verticals. And then we'll be online checking what our friends are about or what happened the last day. So it's all kind of that mashup that's going on that kind of require the brands to be thinking a lot more broadly about their product and services.
Okay, interesting. So how about in Asia? You have been traveling a lot in different countries in this region, APAC. Even in Asia, how do you see how diverse is it in terms of the Phygital experience? What's the key differences, and also what is the commonalities?
Yeah, so I think Asia is very interesting for. I think there's three dynamics in Asia that are particularly interesting. The first one is there's a strong government backing for digital and technology, and we can see that in Hong Kong, in Singapore, Malaysia, Indonesia, China, right?
Yeah.
So there's a strong backing. So the governments are backing up businesses and consumer for adoptions of those technology. The second dynamic is businesses themselves and private investment. And again, we were at CES. We covered CES, and I mentioned earlier in Vegas. And the trend is that the vast majority of exhibitors are from Asia. From China, from Korea, from Japan. And also this year in particular, it's been the strongest contingent of Hong Kong businesses that CES ever had.
Interesting.
So very, very interesting. And so that's obviously having private investment going after. We can see that we have development of new technology coming out of the regions. And then the third dynamic is there's an appetite from consumer here for those new technology. So we know, for example, Chinese consumer, they want digital self-service first. We know also Gen Z in APAC are the most likely to use their mobile phone in store. We also know that Indian people are the biggest adopter of Gen AI in their work or in their life. We also know that from a data point of view, we know data privacy in Europe, for example, is quite strict, and people are afraid of giving their data. It's not the same in Asia. People are more okay to give their data against something. So sometimes again, a freebie or access to something. And so all those kind of three dynamics together make Asia Pacific such a good environment and such a good ground for a fast acceleration of digital strategy. And so I think we'll see again CES, a lot of exhibitors coming from here, some really fun development, but that's going to inspire new entrepreneur, new generation to go and develop new things. So I think we have a perfect ground here in Asia Pacific to be the pioneer and to be the first
pioneer.
kind of
Oh, you mentioned about the third pillar. I think it's quite inspiring about the taste of the consumers in this region. They love the digital experience, and they prefer digital experience even in the physical retail experience or restaurants. They prefer self-serve through the digital platform, right? Can you elaborate?
I think it's a
more?
mix, right? You're right. There's like some really fun experience. I think there was an experience in Hong Kong recently. I'm not going to name the hotel or the restaurant, but you kind of have the food being made on your plate digitally before it's being served to you. It's all those kind of fun experience, right? It's not just being serviced. So I always think about my first experience of a robot in a hotel that was in Shanghai many years ago, and then you order kind of room service, and it comes through a robot. I think it's fun and all, and it's obviously it makes some efficiency gain for the hotel for sure. Would I decide to go back to that hotel just for that robot? Probably not. I think it's a fun experience. I remember it. But it's a part of, you need to build that kind of Phygital journey as part of your kind of overall strategy. Right, I think that's really the point here.
Okay, so with the new advanced technology of robots, what is our role as human being in the physical retail experience? And also e-commerce.
So again, on the robot, I think it's very exciting. It can be very scary when you see how good they are to mimicking the way we move and the way we act, or the way say they're doing kung fu. It is a bit scary. I also remember my first kind of interaction with a dog robot that was in Singapore many years ago, and I was a bit like trying to go around and say, just you don't know what's going to happen. It's kind of a Black Mirror episode, right, where you have the dog robot kind of following you. But yeah, I think we need to embrace it. At the beginning, it's certainly going to be out of pocket for many people or businesses. But I think you need to start testing and really thinking at how that robotics can play a part in your overall strategy. Again, don't make it like a gimmick. Don't make it like out of context, because then that would be wasted money. But think about how it's going to work for you. And again, we've seen robotics. I mentioned earlier, we see around kind of health, around care, around education, and helping you kind of do some work or automated work. There's a lot of ways that can help you. And I think from an interactions, I haven't seen many of those yet, but there may be interactions that can be valuable for a consumer, right? Because you want to build that brand loyalty in the long term. So again, stay away from the gimmick. But build that brand loyalty on the long term. And so there's definitely areas there to explore for businesses.
Okay. A lot of young people, they might as well just start their own business. I think it's quite common in Asia in general, not only Hong Kong. Yeah,
I can see that. And then I think I think it's never been easier now, I guess, for a young entrepreneur to build something, because you have social media, so you have reach. You can reach a lot of people. Then you have AI now that can help you kind of automate some tasks, even your back office, your finance and stuff like that. So if you're a bit ingenious, then you kind of fast track into opening your store. Obviously, it still takes boldness, energy, some investment, but it's easier now than it was, say, 10, 20, 50 years ago. So yeah, it's good to see.
So besides the big corporation, does WGSN also support some SME?
Yeah, 100%. So most of the Fortune 500 will be our clients. The B2C one. We don't really work with the bank, and all the B2B is not really the core of our business, except for manufacturers. But the B2C, most of the largest B2C would work with us across sports and outdoor, across food and drinks, alcohol drinks, across both beauty, cosmetics. So all those from luxury to mass markets. Like we work with all of them, and the way we price our kind of services it's also according to the size of the business. So that kind of help them also to enter that and benefit of our trend forecast and our services.
Are there many from like which part of the in this region?
In the region?
Like for China, of course, a lot of small manufacturers. Other than China.
Yeah. So so we have about including China, we have about 1,500 clients in Asia Pacific. So we're about 6,500 globally, about 1.5 in Asia Pacific, and it's about 1,000 in Asia Pac, excluding China. It's about 500 in China. And then so I mentioned still the core of our business being fashions, and that's kind of where we're known for. Probably about 50% of our clients are from fashion, and then 50% are so non-fashion, so your beauty, food and drinks, and so on and so forth. And amongst us, we're touching the entire kind of vertical. So we work with mills and manufacturers. So as you said, a lot of them, especially in the Greater Bay Area, in Taiwan, in Indonesia, Vietnam. And then we work with brands, retailers. So the entire food chain. We work with some agencies as well. So the kind of entire food chain. Yeah.
Is Vietnam one of the leading manufacturers in fashion business?
So they're good with so they
manufacturing.
Yeah, you're right. So they also, I mean, Vietnam is exciting in Southeast Asia because they're quite entrepreneurial. They have that mindset as I think there's that somewhat that kind of connection with China in that way. So you have a lot of entrepreneurial spirit in China. And the same for Hong Kong. And then in Vietnam, you have kind of a similar entrepreneurial spirit. So they know they're ready to put money on the table in order to get return, right? So that's quite exciting. And then they also have easy access to European markets. So they have like those trade agreements with Europe. So a lot of the manufacturing industry have grown over the years. Recently, is kind of stalled a bit. But yeah, it is definitely has grown. So they're very popular for shoes. A lot of shoes being made there. They're also very popular for consumer electronics components. We know like Samsung work a lot with distributor in Vietnam. But they also have some cool brands that are coming up because they have the know-how. They know how to make stuff now, right? Exactly. So now they also have some cool brands popping up. But for now, I think it's quite
local brands?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, we work with a few of them, but I think for now it's quite limited to the Vietnamese market. They want to be successful at home first, and then starting to export outside in the rest of Southeast Asia. But yeah, it's definitely an interesting market for us. Yeah.
Back to this thing that we mentioned earlier about. You said in the 90s when e-commerce started, in a company, e-commerce team and the retail teams, they're like separately, like work in silos. How about now? How should they like bring some brands literally, I think they bring their e-commerce experience, want to put it back to the retail, just like as you mentioned earlier, people in the physical store, they use digital. How what's the trend of brand bringing back the e-commerce experience to the physical retail?
So I would say first, like we need to avoid the pitfall of just trying to replicate e-commerce in store. We've seen a trend, and it was kind of true just before and after COVID, where some store had an access to the e-commerce site in store, which is not really meaningful, right? What is the point? You want to have a different experience in store that you have online, because you can do the shopping online. So you want to have that kind of connection. I think for us is, and I will go back to the way WGSN works. And then I think you need to build that coherent strategy across your entire business. So break the silos between your function. And so the best way we have assumed that to break a silo for our business is to understand who they are building products or services or experience for. So have a really clear mindset around who your consumer is today and how that consumer is going to be tomorrow. And so bring your entire organizations around the idea of who your consumer is and who is going to be. And so your entire organizations, I'm talking about your research team, your product development, service developments, your experience team, your marketing and sales. And that's the way, once you have that clarity, then you can ask all your function to think about how within the organization, so your e-commerce and then your in-store, how they can work together to service that same customer that is going to be at 8 a.m. in the morning on the website and then at 2 p.m. in the afternoon in your store. How do you think about that customer as one person? And so what the experience you want to have him to have in store and offline? I think that's kind of the key. We know there's a lot of businesses now that have a C-suite, a chief customer officer, right?
Yes.
That role is quite important. It's good. We're starting to see that more. I think it's been quite a while now, maybe 10, 15 years we see that role. But that role is still very stuck to your customer service, reactive, sometimes proactive if the business is good. But they don't really think about building those consumer persona that you want to that you are selling to currently or that you want to target for the future. And that consumer persona, I can't say I'm amazed sometimes how even really big businesses are parking it and not really having those consumer persona built. And I think that is very, very critical. And those personas should be live, right? You don't build a persona today that's going to last you for 2-3 years. It's a work that needs to be done seasonally. Every season, you need to rethink about it. You need how it has evolved and how it transformed. And that needs to really disseminate it across your entire organization. So, and that's exactly what we do at WGSN, right? When we look at the evolutions of trends and the macro trends I was talking about earlier and how that impact the customers, we are reviving or adapting, adjusting those personas season by season because they are changing, sometimes ever so slightly, sometimes a bit more, but you need to have that work done. So you have that coherence in between your kind of physical world and digital world. So yes, for different type of experience in store and online, but with that kind of same idea of who the consumer is and what the future consumer is. So you have the kind of right activation.
Is personalization is one of the keywords?
Yeah.
For this like non-silos experience.
Yes, and then
frictionless experience.
More and more, you're right. Right. So and that's also again because we are so used to those. Personalization online now. I mean, if you're not afraid to share your data, but you go on your Google search and then you have your kind of recommendation and the last searches and stuff like that. You go to e-commerce, there will be pop-up to provide you what you want.
Yes.
So you kind of want to have that ease of transacting in store also. Not entirely because you want to develop a different type of experience in store, but in particular, if you look at the younger generation, Gen Z and Gen Alpha, who are kind of digital first or Phygital first, and they want to feel unique and they want to feel like differentiated from everybody. So if you manage to get that personalization in your store as well, and especially through your, I would say through your staff, right? Your retail staff now is. You don't consider your retail staff as sales staff. It's not just sales staff. Your retail staff needs to be your kind of brand promoter, brand ambassador, exactly. And then with the knowledge of the consumer that they have ahead of them, they can guide them and tailor the service or the experience for those. So personalization is very important. And again, as mentioned earlier, because in Asia, in general, people are more keen and easy to give away their data and not as protective as, say, in the West, for example, or in Europe.
Yeah.
So you can definitely use that to your own advantage.
Okay. It's interesting. A lot of Hong Kong people, they don't agree that they are willing to give away much personal data. But actually, it depends. So we mentioned a few times about Phygital experience. From the point of view, what is a meaningful Phygital experience rather than just a fancy marketing word,
Yeah.
jargons?
Yeah. So as you say, you don't want to be gimmicky. You just want to adopt a new technology or say like have a robot in your store. If you have a robot in your store that just stay high and buy, doesn't bring any value. Okay, it's going to be cool for a moment. People are going to walk in, maybe take your pictures or interact. But if it doesn't really bring any value to you as a consumer or to your kind of your development process or your retail experience, not adding value, right? It's just very gimmicky. So you need to be very intentional, and you need to think about it as a kind of, again, the overall process, how that technology plays a part in that kind of overall process from your development, your marketing, your in-store experience, and that makes more sense. We had at a time some pitfall that we want to kind of avoid. We had a time where all businesses wanted to build apps, right? And so it was the thing to do. I want an app. I have a business. I want an app. Yeah. And then you build an app that costs money. It's probably less expensive now than it used to be before. But then you need to maintain the app. Then you need to add new features constantly to keep the engagement high. Then you need to build an audience. If you have an intention to move part of business to app or be an app first kind of business, then yes, why not? That makes sense. If you just to have an app because it's trendy and everybody has an app, then it's going to be a waste of money and a waste of energy. So you need to be very intentional in how you think about your kind of Phygital experience.
Back to fashion business, which is your expertise. Any good example of Phygital experience?
Gentle Monster, for example, is quite cool in that sense. So they create a space where you kind of a lot of engagement. You don't know if you walk in a museum. You have those. You can obviously touch the item of that kind of product interactions. But you have it is a very immersive space when you can play with things. You don't know if you walk in a museum or a store. And so I think that's a good examples of how you can use a space and have that kind of multifaceted interactions with your consumer.
Okay. Back to WGSN. Your company predicts trends every other day or weeks, okay? Because there's huge amount of data in additional to AI search these days. What is the methodology of your research to predict the trends?
Yeah. And so we always start with macro driver. So we have we have an acronym which is STEPIC, and STEPIC stands for society, technology, environment, politics, industry, and culture and creativity.
Yes.
And so that's the lens through which we look at the world and how the world evolved. And we know those kind of macro drivers in the kind of STEPIC frameworks will have an impact on us as individuals, as human beings, and therefore as consumer. And so our behaviors and lifestyle gonna change or evolve from those macro changes. And the way we then consume, the way we buy the product that we buy, the colors that we buy, will be impacted by those changes. And so this is how our methodology works. Of course, we have a lot of data that goes within that methodology. So there's the observation. We have a team of experts, about 250 experts around the world. We're located in about 40, 60, 50 cities around the world that kind of see what's obviously going on and touch on the trends in every part of the world. And we also have a wealth of data where we're looking at NGO data, weather data, political data, statistics,
sustainability,
yes. of course.
Yes.
And then we have find out when we build our kind of predictive analytics model, we have find out as there's 5 sources of data in particular that's the strongest predictor of trend. There is shelf data, so e-commerce data. So product pricing strategy from the brands. We have social media data, and I'll come back to that a bit. We have trade show data, so I mentioned CES or your catwalk show for fashion, say for example, and we have search data, so your Google search, and also survey. We do a lot of survey, and so the combination of those 5 sources of data are the strongest predictor of trends. And I just want to come back on social because you mentioned TikTok earlier in your question. TikTok is very interesting because there's a lot of stuff happening on TikTok.
Yes.
And then a lot of trends are channeling through TikTok.
Yes.
And a lot of clients coming to us and ask us, okay, which one should I jump into, right? And so the way we look at social media, we don't monitor the entire social media because it's too vast. There's a lot of data and there's a lot of noise. So the way we look at social media in particular is we build what we call influencers map. So across all the categories we're forecasting for, we have those influencer maps. So you know the kind of trend curve. You have the trend curve. You have the pioneer, early adopter, late adopter, mass, and then conservative. And so we're gonna put our influencer according to how we think they influence each of those segments of the trends. So that allows us to understand whether this is a fad versus this is a trend, or what is the longevity of the trend. So how long can you bet on it, and how big that trend is. So it's not just about that kind of viral content. It's about putting back into the context of those macro trends. So we work a lot with TikTok. We use a lot of TikTok data. We now have a product that's called TikTok Dashboard that clients can invest in to kind of monitor trends throughout TikTok. And it's obviously people really love it because a lot of trends happening there, but they need to understand which one they're going to invest in, for how long, and then which one they should just ignore and pass away.
Okay. Out of my curiosity, because TikTok is not available in Hong Kong, how this data can be useful for the local marketers in Hong Kong?
It's very sad, yes. It's not available in Hong Kong. I think in the last kind of few years, we need to look at how the dynamic of trends have evolved. Let's be honest, right? 10, 15, 20 years ago, a lot of the trends were coming from the West and being kind of adapted to the region.
Yes.
That's changing
Now it's K-pop.
Massively, right? K-pop has been the kind of first big Asian cultural product, services, experience that you want to say, that has really had an impact on the West. And I think that has created that belief for a lot of people in the regions, like, we can do it. We can do it too. And then also connecting to what we discussed a bit earlier about Vietnam and China, where a lot of those businesses and manufacturers have kind of learned how to do things and to do things well. Now they the pride to be able to do product themselves and present product themselves. I'm traveling to Guangzhou quite regularly. I love to see like local brands, how the in-store design looks so cool, the product looks so cool. Because they are newer on the market, they are bolder. They try stuff. Not always work, but they try stuff. They are taking more risk. And I think that's pretty exciting. So in the light of that, when you think about how the trends now are very strong in Asia Pacific, we know obviously Japan, especially for Hong Kong, Hong Kongers love to go to Japan for holidays or like get inspiration. But I know if TikTok is not available here, there's still some connection, right? Instagram is, so there's still some connection with the rest of APAC. And so a lot of business here would look at what happened in China because it's proximity, cultural proximity, and especially in the kind of Greater Bay Area in the south. But they will look at what's going on in Korea. They will look at what's going on in Japan as well. So those are, I mean, for me, it's very exciting to see. I'm a Guaylo in Hong Kong. I've been here for 8 years. I've been in Asia for almost 15 years now. It's very exciting to see more of those businesses like really having an impact here, being more proud of the product that they put on the market,
Yes.
and starting to go outside
Yes.
in the West as well to sell their product and services.
Yeah.
So I think that's pretty exciting.
And because of the trends of e-commerce, I think there will be more local business they want to, market to the world.
Much easier, definitely much easier. Again, kind of we touched on a bit earlier also, it's never been as easy for of a entrepreneur to build a business, right? Again, you still need some investment, be bold and creative, but you have social media, you have e-commerce, you have AI that kind of help you facilitate all the kind of all the production, the process. And so we work with Amazon. It's a publicly available information, but we work with Amazon in Europe to help them, helping their Chinese manufacturers to build the right product for Europe, right? And so through that process, obviously there's some learnings happening, right? And then it's just gonna get more and more common for local businesses to export. And you talk about Hong Kong also. In Hong Kong, most recently, we have a number of conversations on how Hong Kong businesses can sell their products in the UAE, in Dubai, in the Middle East, right?
Yes,
so that
yes.
connection is getting stronger and stronger.
Yes.
In fairness, you want to try and find other markets to export. So if the US is a bit more tricky at the moment, then you need to find other markets. And then there's that connection that seems to happen a lot more with the Middle East, right? So also there's an opportunity there.
Last question about, WGSN help a lot of businesses to predict trends, to track on the trends. Manufacturers first or marketing first?
There's a constant battle in all businesses. There's a constant battles of, I'm the product guy. If the guy buys, it's because my product is good. And then the sales guy or the marketing guy, the consumer buy because my marketing is good, or my sales is good, right? I think it has to be a combination, right? Unless you have a product that's quite unique. So if you pioneer, you think about the Facebook and LinkedIn of the world, right? They came first, they got the market share, or the Google even, right? It didn't come first, it beat Yahoo in the way, but they kind of get that critical mass. It's difficult for any entrance now to go after that market. But from a B2C point of view or the product point of view, it's not. There's still potential, right? But I think it is. You have that right combination. You have a good product that looks good, that feels good, but you have that kind of right marketing strategy to get there. Without it, it's just not going to work. It's interesting to see how many new businesses, young businesses, can start out of Instagram and then slowly move to being have their retail space and things like that. So we see that it's quite exciting.
Yes.
But you have to have, obviously if you have good marketing but your product, you're not going to retain your clients on marketing alone. You're going to retain on the quality of the product, or whether it's valuable or easy to use. You have to think about.
So in terms of business, in your company WGSN, manufacturers and marketers.
From a usage
from the usage point of view.
So
you mentioned a few times about manufacturers.
Yes. Yeah. So a lot of the users of the WGSN, I think, and historically, are designers, are the product maker.
The product maker.
The product maker, and our site has been built originally for that cohort, and so we're known primarily for that cohort. So a lot of students that goes into design school, they will have access to the WGSN. Most of the design school have access to the WGSN. So we're very well known in that. That being said, there's two others kind of cohorts of WGSN users. One is the marketers. Yes, we have a lot of marketers on the site as well. And again, it's more around the consumer insight and kind of behaviors, patterns, and things like that. A lot of the retail strategy as well. But we also have a lot of merchandisers and buyers. So, and for a time, that seems to kind of even out now. But there was a time where designers had the most power in the business. That has tended to change to more merchandisers and buyers having most power.
Yes.
Because merchandisers and buyers are going to select what kind of product they're going to sell in the store, right?
Yes.
So they closer to the sales. So from a business value point of view, they have taken a bit more importance. We're actually building more solutions for those guys because those guys are not as interested into the color trends or the details of your shirts and things like that. They're more interested in kind of volume of sales, on the type of garments that they can put for fashion, or the type of items they can put in their stores. So those be the three, but primarily, right, more product maker, product design, manufacturers, then marketers, and then merchandisers and buyers.
Okay. Yeah. Any brands you can mention that is one of your clients?
So I mentioned a few, but so we work extensively with retailers. So Amazon in would be one of them across the entire world. We have, I mentioned Mustoy in Australia, in Hong Kong. We work with Li and Fong, so the sourcing business, so slightly different. I will tell you, there's a lot of those case study in the site. So if you go to the WGSN.com, you'll see we have case studies. So we have a bank of businesses. A lot of businesses are very discreet. Because it's
how so?
Because it's a lot of their IP and then right, so they don't necessarily want to tell that they work with us. They want to keep that a bit of a secret, even within organization, which is quite funny. We work with like a luxury brand, French luxury brand in the region, and so even within the organization, they don't want a department to know that they work with the WGSN.
That's my secret recipe.
Like very, 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 very much so.
About this year, our theme is generate growth, new growth. Which area from the WGSN point of view will be the growth of businesses in this region in year 2026?
Obviously on the theme of Phygital, and then kind of experience and transforming kind of your in-store experience. We know we have statistics that prove that kind of hybrid experience, multi-channel experience done well will increase your kind of shopper lifetime value. And will also increase your brand loyalty for the long term, right? So very, very important for you to have that nailed and think through how you want that experience in store to connect with your kind of experience online. That experiential market is poised to grow 15% per year for the next 10 years, right? So you have to really think about what kind of experience you want to give your consumer when they come to the store, because you want them to have a reason to go out of their house and come to your store in particular. And if you think about new generations in particular, they don't necessarily go to the store just to shop for a particular item. They will go with their friends. They will go to have spend some time out of their house, and particularly in Hong Kong, where house is small, so you want to get out and do something out in store. So you have to leverage on that, right? And the same for kind of community build, community events. Interesting. So I'm a runner, right? But you have that the rise of Strava and the running club, right? You have Strava, that's like a social media for runners, and then at the same time, so you have more and more people that want to be in the street together and run together. So there's a lot of opportunity. I'm talking about running because I know that feel quite well. There's an opportunity to build community events around your store, and then brands can absolutely tap on it, right? So some group will, you go to a cafe, or you'll experience new shoes or anything like that, and you talk about it online. So it's that kind of creating that online offline experience, what is very important. So making those community events, doing workshop. I always think also, again, I've been to a shop I'm not going to name it because it's not necessarily nice to them, but I've been to a shop in Hong Kong recently, and they sell leather. And so they have kind of nice range, a few good products that I wanted to touch anyway. But then I ask the store attendant and say, where's the leather from? Where's the designer? What is stories and stuff? I didn't know any of those.
No idea.
No idea. The thing was like, okay, then that's kind of reproducing e-commerce into a store. I need a bit of that storytelling. I need a bit of that understanding where it's from. And then if you have that story, and sometimes it can be not the right story, but if you kind of give me that story about the person, then I'm kind of getting me a bit closer to your brands.
Yes.
And potentially I will talk about that stories and experience to someone else.
Yes.
Will attract more people, and potentially I will come back because I have an affect now for that brand or for that story. I think that's what's important. So again, I was saying, no, your staff is not your sales staff. Your staff is your
brand ambassador.
Brand ambassador, exactly. And so you need to educate, and you need to make sure that they are playing that role for you.
Yeah. So the brand storytelling on your website, your staff has to be as good as that.
100%. 100%. Yeah.
So to the audience listening to this channel today, what type of mindset shift will you suggest them to change for this coming emerging trends?
Yeah. I think first and foremost, we touched that a couple of times today, don't lock your teams away. Make sure that your teams across function are working together. There's one goal. It is to build that kind of customer loyalty, because at the end of the day, you want to make money. And so you need to make sure that you have a clear understanding of your consumer, who your consumer is and what is going to be, and make sure that all the teams are working alongside with that same kind of customer in view. Be intentional in what you do. Don't be gimmicky. So cool, you have a robot. Why do you have a robot? What value is going to bring today? Is it going to be value for you tomorrow? Then as a fair investment. If it's not, if you can't answer those questions, find a way to answer those questions first before making the investment. We talk about technology, of course, is test and invest in technologies. There's a lot of stuff going on. Don't stay behind. Make sure that AI, we talk a lot about AI, but make sure from the top down, there is AI adoption, there's an AI push. Make sure you test technology. And at your level, right, you have a big business, you have a lot of money, then it's easy for you to have maybe a few robots or to invest in a few technology. If you're a smaller business that thinks about at your scale what you can do, but you need to think about this. And then I think the last one is kind of your physical retail experience. So we talk digital, physical together as a mashup, but you need to think about them separately as well. So what is your physical experience? What are you gonna make difference in store that you can't have in online? So you're gonna have people that want to get out of their house and come to your space in particular.
Okay. Last add-on question: is AI ready to forecasting trends?
We use AI a lot. We are using AI a lot. It is in many ways. We collect a lot of data, so AI get us really fast to tag the data and store the data and organize our data. We have our own Gen AI solution. So if you will, your ChatGPT built in within WGSN. So that means easier for people to go look for content the way they want. So that makes them a lot more efficient. But we also use machine learning and AI for our own predictive analytics. So I would say to you, absolutely, it is an imperative. We need to use it. I think the risk and the challenge is if you use a source of AI where you're you're unsure of the data that's being input into the system, then you have risk, because then you can have a lot of opinions.
Yes.
And we have some funny moments with AI that AI builds something where they don't know about something that doesn't exist.
Yes.
So you need to be able to fact check that.
Yeah.
And then I think that's the reason for a company to work with WGSN is we know exactly what we put in the system, because it's a closed kind of loop system.
Yes.
It's our own data, our proprietary research. So we know that the results that you get from using our Gen AI is going to be tested and checked and validated by our experts.
Good. Thank you so much, Marc. Thank you for your time.
Thanks. Thank you so much, Rudi.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.